Perhaps you have wanted to change your life at some point. You worked harder, woke up earlier, wrote to-do lists, disciplined yourself. Maybe you even saw some initial success, more productivity, more control. But deep inside, that feeling remained. Something is blocking you, something heavy, invisible, that you cannot grasp. You are tired, even though you sleep enough. Restless, even though objectively everything is okay. Motivated for a short time, then empty again. This is exactly where our story begins. Because not everything that holds you back is visible. Some burdens do not show up on your calendar, not on your resume, not in the mirror. They sit deeper, in your habits, in your nervous system, in the silent routines you never consciously chose. Like an invisible layer that is built up over years and now makes every attempt at change harder than it needs to be. Many people believe they fail because of a lack of willpower, that they are simply not disciplined enough, not tough enough, not consistent enough. But what if the problem is not your strength at all? What if what is blocking your growth is something you never learned to recognize, let alone let go of? There are processes in life that do not begin with struggle, but with relief. Not with more pressure, but with less inner noise. And when this invisible burden finally begins to disappear, it does not just change one area of your life. Your entire system resets. Decisions become clearer. Energy feels more stable. Self-control suddenly becomes easier because it is no longer working against you. This video is not about motivation in the classic sense. It is about something deeper, about the hidden factors that steer your thinking, your energy, and your success without you even noticing. If you have ever felt that your life is heavier than it should be, then you are exactly in the right place. Because maybe you do not need to become stronger. Maybe you first need to become lighter. Look around in everyday life. Most people are not living slowly. They are living at a constant sprint. Appointments, messages, obligations, expectations. As soon as one task is finished, the next one is already waiting. Breaks feel guilty. Rest seems like a waste of time. And it is exactly in this environment that the invisible burdens are created, the ones that block us in the long run, because your body and your mind are not designed to be in a permanent state of alarm. When stress, overstimulation, and constant availability become normal, your internal system switches into a mode with only one goal: to endure, not to grow, not to optimize, to survive. Decisions become more short-term. Needs become louder. Patience becomes shorter. And from small, seemingly harmless habits, an invisible net emerges that holds you in place. You reach for your phone more often, even though you actually need rest. You eat not out of hunger, but out of exhaustion. You postpone important decisions because your head is already too full. From the outside, your life may look stable, but on the inside, your system is constantly working against you. Not because you have failed, but because it has adapted to an unhealthy, permanent state. From a psychological perspective, this is not a character flaw, but a protective reaction. The brain loves predictability, even when it is unhealthy. Better a familiar chaos than an unknown change. That is why we cling to routines that drain our energy. That is why real change often feels so exhausting. It threatens not only habits, but the feeling of safety. The tragic part is this: the longer this state lasts, the more normal it feels. Fatigue becomes a personality trait. Irritability becomes everyday life. Inner restlessness becomes the standard. And at some point, you forget what it feels like to think clearly, to act with focus, and to experience genuine inner calm. This is exactly where the turning point lies, because what has slowly built up can also slowly dissolve again, but only if you recognize what is really holding you back. Change rarely begins where we expect it to. Most people believe they have to actively rebuild their lives, set new goals, introduce stricter rules. But deep down, growth works differently. It does not start with action, but with a signal, a quiet switch inside the system that says, it is safe to let go. When you give your body and your mind space, they respond immediately. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly and precisely. As soon as the permanent energy consumption decreases, as stimuli become fewer and breaks are no longer fought against but allowed. Your internal system begins to rethink. The nervous system shifts from a state of alarm into a mode of regulation. And suddenly, resources become available that were previously reserved only for endurance. In psychology, this is called a shift from a reactive to a regulating state. Your brain no longer has to constantly react to everything. It is allowed to prioritize, to organize, to recognize connections. Decisions no longer feel like acts of force, but like logical next steps. This is the moment when real change becomes possible. You can imagine it like an organization that has been operating in crisis mode for years. Everyone is putting out fires, no one is planning. As soon as the pressure eases, departments start communicating again. Processes interlock. Exactly the same thing happens inside you. Thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations begin to work together again instead of sabotaging each other. Many people get scared at this stage, because with the calm comes signals that were ignored for a long time: fatigue, needs, unresolved questions. But this is not a setback. It is a sign that your system is finally speaking honestly to you again. And this is exactly where the power lies. Not in constant doing, but in the right switching. Because once this internal signal is set, everything else follows almost by itself. At this point, many people make the same mistake. They feel, for the first time in a long while, some clarity, some inner calm, and immediately try to control this phase. They build new rules, new plans, new optimization strategies, more structure, more discipline, more pressure. And by doing so, they unconsciously reactivate the old alarm mode. The greatest misconception in personal development is the assumption that more effort automatically leads to better results. In reality, excessive control often worsens exactly the problem one wants to solve, because a system that has just learned to relax reacts sensitively to new coercion. It withdraws, becomes sluggish, or rebellious. Another common mistake is comparison. As soon as things get a little easier, you look outward. Others seem further along, more productive, more successful. The inner dialogue becomes harsher. Why am I not there yet? Why is this taking me so long? But change is not linear. It follows no schedule and no external standard. It is an internal process, not a competition. Many people give up at this stage because they think they are doing something wrong. But this slow, unspectacular progress is exactly the sign that something fundamental is changing. Real stability feels boring at first. No adrenaline rush, no drama, no extreme highs. But this calm is precisely the ground on which sustainable habits grow. Those who remain patient here and do not immediately bury everything again allow their system to reorganize itself, not to function faster, but to function better. The decisive step is not to do more, but to stop working against your own rhythm. Imagine two people who live almost identical lives on the outside. Both have the same job, similar working hours, comparable responsibility. One appears constantly exhausted, irritable, under internal pressure. The other appears calm, clear, focused, even though he is not doing less. The difference lies not in talent or discipline, but in what is happening in the background. An everyday example: a young project manager in her mid-30s, years in functional mode, always available, always reliable, always at her limit. She tried to change by becoming more productive, more tools, more planning, more self-optimization. But nothing lasted. Only when she began to consciously allow breaks, make her evenings less stimulating, and draw clear boundaries between work and recovery did something unexpected happen. After a few weeks, it was not her performance that changed, but her perception. Decisions became easier. Conflicts felt less threatening. She began to set priorities again instead of just reacting. Not because she worked harder, but because her system was no longer permanently under tension. The same person, the same environment, but a completely different internal state. This pattern appears again and again. People who reduce their invisible burdens not only regain energy, but also orientation. They start listening to their internal feedback again. Fatigue becomes a signal, not an enemy. Motivation returns without being forced. This is exactly the point at which change becomes sustainable. Not spectacular, but stable. and above all, self-sustaining. If change does not arise through pressure, but through relief, then the question arises, how do you implement this concretely without immediately turning your entire life upside down? The answer is surprisingly simple, but not easy. It is not about adding more, but about consciously removing. Like a kind of internal fasting. The first step is stimulus fasting. Every day there are countless small impulses that fragment your attention. Notifications, messages, background noise. If you create fixed time windows each day in which your nervous system does not have to react, it begins to calm down. 90 minutes without input, without scrolling, without multitasking, can achieve more than any motivational speech. The second step is pace fasting. Many people live at a rhythm that does not match their internal processing. Everything has to be immediate, fast, efficient. But your brain needs time to integrate experiences. Consciously plan slow transitions. No meetings back to back. No tasks without a break in between. These small in-between spaces are not a luxury. They are repair time for your system. The third step is emotional fasting. Not every discussion, not every expectation, not every mood of other people deserves your energy. Clear boundaries are not a sign of coldness, but of self-regulation. The less emotional, constant load you carry, the more stable your inner balance becomes. These steps seem unspectacular, but that is exactly where their power lies. They signal safety to your system, and safety is the prerequisite for your body and mind to stop protecting themselves and start developing. At the end of this development, there is no new self, no perfect version of who you are. What emerges is something far more valuable, a state in which your system no longer works against you, but with you. Your body responds more clearly. Your mind becomes calmer. Your decisions feel more aligned because they no longer arise from scarcity, but from stability. When the invisible burdens disappear, it is not only your energy level that changes. Your entire everyday life takes on a different quality. You need less willpower because your internal signals become reliable again. Hunger, fatigue, focus, motivation, they show up at the right time and in the right intensity. Life no longer feels like a permanent struggle, but like a process you can guide. Many people wait for the perfect moment to change, for more time, more strength, more clarity. But these things only emerge once you allow your system to unload. You do not have to become tougher. You do not have to become faster. You have to look more honestly at what is weighing you down internally. Perhaps that is the real turning point. Not the question of how you achieve more, but what you are allowed to let go of. Because underneath all the pressure, the habits, the expectations, and the inner noise, you were never broken. You were just overloaded. And in the moment this load begins to disappear, your life also begins to reorganize itself.